The Independence Day march through Warsaw was the biggest staged so far by right-wing extremists. State television estimated more than 100,000 protesters took part. It was a show of strength that attracted neo-Nazi groups and white supremacists from countries right across Europe.
The views of the extreme right are now entering the political mainstream in Poland, and the number of xenophobic attacks, particularly against the Muslim community, is steeply on the rise.
Counter-demonstrations were kept well out of the way of the march by lines of police blocking side streets. But a group of women pensioners managed to stage their own protest, sitting down in the middle of the route and refusing to budge.
This is my city as well as their city.
Fears of violence proved unfounded, but fears remain about what the advance of the far right means for the future of Poland.
Every year the nationalist marches become larger and larger. This is also reflected in Polish politics, so more and more people are voting for extreme right-wing parties.
In a stark contrast to the march of the extremists, anti-government protesters were paying their respects to the man who set himself on fire last month, declaring the ruling party was destroying both the law and democracy in the country.
I don't like the law and justice government and the way they conduct their policies. They did a few good things for Poles, but mostly they do things in a shameless and arrogant way under the cover of the night, and I don't like it.
They also came to lay rocks at the scene, building a cairn in a memorial to his sacrifice, which cost him his life. Rocks, they hope, will lay heavily on the conscience of government ministers. David Chater, Al Jazeera, Warsaw.
I've discussed Aydin Paladin, or mentioned her at the very least, on this channel before in brief. And today might not be my be-all, end-all analysis of Aydin Paladin, but she has returned to prominence in the conversation about crypto-fascism in this corner of political YouTube. Aydin Paladin is a friend of almost every Nazi you can name off the top of your head, like open white supremacist, race realist, and fascist proper, you know. She is very disingenuous on a lot of stuff, so she talks about race realism, but she doesn't like to own labels because she is trying to preserve some kind of reputation for herself in her field as a social scientist. So I guess she wants to wield these right-wing, extreme right-wing intolerant positions without having to be held morally responsible for them. She wants to have entree into mainstream academia. That's kind of her big come up, is that she's going to get it is going to get her moment in mainstream academia. So at the moment, she is not owning her positions. She espouses that she's not a white nationalist, but when I spoke to her directly, she said that she's a civic nationalist, but she believes that white people are responsible for Western civilization. So these are the kind of wiggle words that people use to get out of moral accountability. You know what I mean? Which is like, I don't believe in white nationalism, but I believe that nationalism is good under white people. You know what I mean? It's wishy-washy. And the reason she can get away with this is because the zeitgeist, the mainstream narrative, the mainstream right-wing narrative in this corner of YouTube is crypto-fascist. It is, Andy Warski saying that he believes that race is real, but you shouldn't do anything about it. If you believe that race is real, that's code for you believe that somehow non-white people are genetically inferior to black. That black people are genetically inferior in terms of intelligence and other factors to white people. And if you endorse that and then try to sort of claw it back with you know, don't do anything about it. Well, you know, it doesn't matter. They just need your support. The people who actually want to do something political with what they refer to as race realism, which is scientific racism, all they need is your endorsement. You know, if you legitimize them, then they're going to take that position and use it for political ends. They're going to use it to justify the bell curve mission, which is to delegitimize welfare. Because, of course, why would you help disadvantaged black people if they are genetically incapable of improving, no matter how much you invest in their education, no matter how much you try to bring them out of poverty? Race realism makes the argument that poverty and suffering and ignorance is the black condition, that's how black people are born, that's how they've been, and that's how they'll always will be. So you cannot say that white people created Western civilization and not be a white nationalist. You cannot say that that the Holocaust is exaggerated, because that is what her denialist language, her revisionist. She's not a Holocaust revisionist. She uses Holocaust revision language. Because revisionism would imply that we've got new data, and we're incorporating this new data into conclusions. Aydin Paladin is not a Holocaust researcher, and she doesn't have any fucking new data. She just would like to use the window that is created for a revision of the story of the Holocaust and mix that with a narrative that is advantageous to white nationalism making political gains. Because if Aydin Paladin moves the Overton window and makes it mainstream to soften or deflect the kind of the number one reason people would ignore her ultra-nationalist political position and her friend's ultra-nationalist political position, which is the Holocaust, which is the biggest evidence that ultra-nationalism is a threat. When it's implemented, that ethno-nationalism is a threat. When it's implemented by law and with military force, then she gets to get her foot back in the door, because she either gets to pretend that it didn't happen last time, or she gets to pretend that it's not going to happen this time because it wasn't really that bad the last time that her ideological comrades got power. So I think that the big thing that we need to remember about Aydin is not just that she's a denier, not just that she manipulates the language of revisionism, but that she's an apologist. The video that Kevin Logan rightfully criticized and took a clip out of to substantiate his accusation that Aydin Paladin is a Holocaust denier. She's not just that. Was a video about Polish nationalism and how Poland was the future of Europe, and that Poland's nationalism was going to save Western civilization from Muslim savages, or as she refers to them, kebabs. And talks in that video extensively about how Poland has a good history of being good at getting rid of kebabs. She applauds Poland for having a history of being able to kill Muslims, to cleanse Muslims. She takes it, like many white nationalists do, back to the Crusades, in which a bunch of atrocities were committed by European Christians against Muslim people in a twisted quest to reclaim the Holy Land for white Christians, and talks about how that legacy leads up into today's the merits, the virtues of today's Polish nationalist regime, which is some Nazi-ass shit. She is apologizing for, and again, her Hitler apologia, her Nazi apologia is much vaguer and in a smaller quantity than her general nationalist Poland apologia in that video. You know, you have to really follow Aydin Paladin to pick up on the signals that she's putting out and the way that she cues up her alt-right friends without having to take political backlash or moral liability for what she wants, which is for Poland to take the place of Nazi Germany and become the force that does to Muslims what Hitler did to the Jews. So that's why I always go back to the channel, not making a clean distinction between nationalism, civic nationalism, and white nationalism, because there's barely really any difference between the moral missions of these two political philosophies. They are both obsessed with preservation of the existing hegemony of white people in certain countries. In a lot of them, countries where those white people are not the native population. Because when we talk about the West, we are including countries like the United States of America and Canada, which are completely stolen countries that do not contain white indigenous populations. So yes, Aydin Holocaust is a denier. Aydin Holocaust is Aydin Holocaust. That's a good one. Go with that. Aydin Paladin is a revisionist and a person who abuses the window of good faith that is allowed for some kind of revision within for new data, legitimate data found out about the Holocaust. And most importantly, she is a Nazi apologist. Polish Nazi apologist.